It's a conversation we've had a couple of times throughout the offseason, but I wanted to reset it as we are inching ever so close to the start of fall camp. What's the biggest game on Tennessee's schedule, and is that the same game that you would consider the most important game on Tennessee's schedule? That, whole lot more. It's your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, welcome into Locked On Vols, your Thursday edition. I'm Eric Kane. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, right as your team every single day. Big shout out to our friends over at Game Time for making the show possible today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, put in the promo code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Got a really fun show today. I'm actually really excited about today's show and tomorrow's show. First, tomorrow's show, I'm going to be out of town, so I went ahead and pre-recorded it. But you everydayers know that every year entering the new season, whether it's a couple of weeks before the opener or right around this time before fall camp, I do something called the Tennessee Player Draft. I have a very special guest that'll join me every time, and we'll alternate picks, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 20, and then we decide which team is better. That's coming up on tomorrow's show. My buddy Boogie Bentley from Talking Vols is going to join us. We're going to have the Tennessee Player Draft on tomorrow's show, so you don't want to miss that. But on today's show, biggest game on the schedule. I think I have a different game in mind than a lot of you guys, but the more and more you think about it, you can make cases for several different games. We'll discuss that here in a matter of seconds. And then in segments 2 and 3, we're going to dive down deep into an article that CBS Sports put out a couple of days ago on tight football games, blowout rates for some conferences, and specifically for some teams in those conferences. What if I told you that over the last 10 years, 50% of Tennessee's football games have been blowouts one way or the other? Is that believable? We're going to dive down deep into some of those seasons, specifically the Josh Heupel era, and a lot of good stuff coming up in segments 2 and 3 on that subject. So I hope you stick around and check that out. You can watch us, listen to us, subscribe to us, all that for free wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on the YouTube channel where you can subscribe to Locked On Vols. Okay, so I've been doing radio hit and throughout the offseason, throughout the summer, and they continuously ask me a lot of those common questions on, what's the biggest game? What's the game that you have circled on the calendar? What game means the most for Tennessee? In other words, what's maybe the most important game for Tennessee? And my answer has always been Oklahoma. And they say, well, whoa, what about NC State, right? That's a huge non-conference game there in week 2 at a neutral site in Charlotte. And I agree, it's a big-time matchup, and I fear that a lot of the Tennessee fan base is just overlooking the Wolfpack. I think Tennessee will be favored in that football game, and I think Tennessee should win that football game. I'm picking Tennessee to win that game, but NC State finished the 2023 season strong, got better in the transfer portal, got significantly better at the quarterback position with Grace McCall, so that's going to be no pushover. I think that's going to be a tight football game, but I believe Tennessee should and will win that football game. My answer is Oklahoma for a number of different reasons. One, it's the first SEC game, and I know that might be coach talk and coach speak and maybe the former football player in me, but that is kind of not your first test, because NC State will certainly be a test, but that's your first. I don't even want to say that NC State is a quiz because I'm not trying to diminish it, but I mean, you get into SEC play, it means more, no pun intended, right? I mean, that's your first SEC game, and more than anything, that is your first true road game. You're taking on the Wolfpack at a neutral site in Charlotte where it's going to be 50-50 minimum Tennessee and Wolfpack fans. Tennessee fans are going to travel, and in fact, it might be even more orange in there than red or scarlet or whatever color they are. But this game in Norman is going to be huge. They're calling it on the Oklahoma side probably the biggest regular season football game in the last, in this century, in quite some time, in a couple of decades. On Tennessee's side, of course, it's huge because, in my opinion, and I've been kind of phrasing this all offseason long, that is the tone setter for this football season, in my opinion. You go on the road, and we'll get into Oklahoma here in a moment, the specifics of Jackson Arnold and all that, Heupel versus Oklahoma, but you go on the road in that game, say you win that football game. Okay, you're sitting pretty coming home or for an off week, going to Arkansas that next week on the 5th, and then coming home for the long stretch against Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, and Mississippi State before hitting the road for Georgia and then coming back to Neyland for the regular season finale at Neyland against UTEP and then on the road against Vanderbilt to finish off the regular season. My point is, you win that game against Oklahoma, and you have really started off on the right foot to stake your claim as a true contender for the 12-team college football playoff. Because if you win that game against Oklahoma, in my opinion, you can afford to lose the game against Alabama at home. I'm not saying Tennessee will lose that game. In fact, depending on where the season is and these two teams, Tennessee could very easily be the favorite at home against the Crimson Tide on the third Saturday in October 19th. That is no gimme for Alabama this year. Certainly not a gimme for Tennessee, don't get me wrong. Tennessee the last couple of years obviously beat Alabama the last time these two teams played at Neyland Stadium back in 2022. Josh Heupel's offense has given Nick Saban, I know Nick Saban's not there anymore, but has given Nick Saban's defense fits since Heupel's been here in Knoxville. In 2021, the game really got away from Heupel there at the end in Tennessee in the fourth quarter, but Tennessee was taking it to Alabama and Bryant-Denny. 2022, of course, Tennessee won that football game. 2023, Tennessee had a double-digit lead at halftime, just completely dropped the ball and, had a goose egg there in the second half, and it was still only, a 13, 14-point game altogether, but Tennessee just didn't show up and play 4 quarters. But my point is, Tennessee's proven that it can play with Alabama, certainly, but that game at home is a big one either way. But if you win that game against Oklahoma, and understanding you take care of business on the road at Arkansas and a home against Florida. I know that home game against Florida is no gimme because Tennessee and Florida, it's never easy, and Florida has Tennessee's number. But if you do what you're supposed to do, you beat the Gators at home regardless because you're a better football team. And again, the game's at Neyland Stadium, you can afford to drop that game against Alabama. Say you have a slip-up. Say you lose that game against Alabama. Not the end of the world. In a perfect world, say that's your first loss on the season, okay? You beat Kentucky, as you should. Better football team, won't be easy. Beat Mississippi State. You going on the road to Georgia. That's assuming, say, hey, right now that's a loss for Tennessee. Certainly Tennessee can win that game, but let's be real. Let's have a grown-up conversation. I'm going to pick Tennessee to lose that game in the onset here in the summer months. Depending on where these two teams are at this point in the season, maybe that'll change on game week, but no one's going to criticize me, or you shouldn't criticize me if you're being logical about things, if Tennessee losing to Georgia. So that's a loss. You should beat UTEP, you should beat Vanderbilt. So my point is, if you win at Oklahoma, you can afford another loss on that schedule and still be, gosh, if you're 10-2 in the SEC, you better be in the college football playoff. I think that Oklahoma game is just monumental. Now, instrumental, huge. Now, say you lose that Oklahoma game, and this is where the other side of the coin is. That's why people are probably saying the biggest game on the schedule is Alabama. Say you lose that game against Oklahoma. It makes that game at home against the Crimson Tide that much more important. Not only is it a rivalry game, third Saturday in October, not only is it a home game, but if you want to be a college football playoff team, you've got to win that game against Alabama at home. And you've got, again, you'd rather play the Crimson Tide at home than on the road in Bryant-Denny. So I can see both sides of the coin here for those saying that, like me, the first game or the first SEC game against Oklahoma is the biggest and the most important. I can also understand when people say, well, no, that home game against Alabama is the most important. Again, we're not trying to overlook here, but we're not even really taking into account NC State. Some of you guys out there might be saying, well, it's Florida. Until Tennessee can consistently beat Florida and get that monkey off its back, it's got to be the Gators. And I hear you, because we continue to do win-loss going into every single season, and I've seen so many more losses than I've seen wins. I've seen 3 wins since 2004 against the Florida Gators. I was in-house in 2004 when James Wilhoit made that 51-yard field goal. I was watching on television in 2016. I was in-house in 2022 when Tennessee had a huge lead against the Gators, but still almost gave that game up. I understand people that are going to say the Florida Gators. Makes so much sense to me. But gosh darn it, Tennessee is a better football team playing at home. That should be a win. It should be a win. But if you're going to say that's the most important game, certainly understandable. I can't fault you there. My answer is Oklahoma, because I think that it's a good football team. It's got a good defense. It's got a young, promising quarterback, much like Nico Iamaleava. First true test for him, really. First true test for Nico, first true road test for Nico. It's the SEC opener, and then, of course, all the national hoopla of Josh Heupel going home, where national championship, Heisman runner-up, assistant coach, the ending, Bob Stoops, no longer head coach of the program, but he's back there, kind of pulling the strings like he is. There's going to be a lot of hoopla for that football game, so there's there's a lot that goes into account there. Plus, after that Oklahoma game, you get your first off week. Empty the tanks, burn the ships, win that football game. I think that is the biggest game on the schedule for Tennessee. But I understand if you have another opinion. So let me hear your biggest game on the schedule, most important game on the schedule. Maybe that's the same game. Maybe you can differentiate those somehow. @_Kane or @LockedOnVols. And of course, on the YouTube channel, you can comment on this episode. Hey, really interesting subject matter we're going to get into when we return here on Locked On Vols. It is stemming from an article over at CBS Sports talking about blowout games and tight game rate, if you will, in college football dating back to the 2014 season. That is coming up next as we continue on here with your Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. Game Time is the perfect place to buy tickets to the events in your area. It can be sporting events, can be entertainment events, can be at Thompson Bowling Arena, the Food City Center, can be at Neyland Stadium, can be at Lindsey Nelson Stadium, or it could be at the Bijou Theater on Gay Street, could be at the Tennessee Theater, could be what other venues are in your hometown. Chances are, whether it's sports, whether it's entertainments, it's concerts, it's comedy, you can buy those tickets on the safe, secure, easy-to-use Game Time app. Download that Game Time app today, create an account, put in the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. That is promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off at the Game Time app. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. They've got all-in prices. They got views from your seat so you know exactly what you're paying for, but most importantly, they have the lowest price guarantee where if you find a cheaper ticket somewhere else on another app game in the same section, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. They've got the best customer service in the game that's on the Game Time app. Again, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, guys, welcome back into your Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys for making this your first listen each and every day. Check out Locked On SEC. Make that your second listen today after Locked On Vols. Fall camp just right around the corner. First practice is next Wednesday. Next Wednesday. I was gonna say next Wednesday or the next Wednesday on the schedule. That means next Wednesday. Smart. But yeah, man, we have almost survived the offseason, guys. We are here, and check out all that over on Locked On SEC from a bigger look at the conference. Okay, so I've been reading and I've been evaluating and I've been researching. I'm not gonna lie to you, the last couple of days, when I get intrigued or interested in a topic, and this is how it's supposed to work. Say you have other outlets out there that pose a scenario or pose a question, and you read that and you evaluate that article, and then you take it further and evaluate it with your specific team, and that's kind of how this has been. Tom Fornelli over at CBS Sports, a couple of days ago, he put out an article saying which college football teams play the tightest games. Essentially, what is the blowout rate for some of these teams and some of these conferences in college football? And he does a nice job of breaking it down. He puts them into sections, basically saying which games are not fun to watch, which games are you turning the channel to another game late in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter, in the second half. He has a group of 15 teams that are kind of in that biggest blowout rate. He's got another section on which teams play the tightest games, meaning they might not be the best team in the country, but win or lose, typically these 15 teams are playing in the tightest football games on routine the last 10 years. And then he's got another section down here that has 15 more teams that said, hey, these are 2-score teams. So it's not quite a blowout, but it's not one score, highly contested contest to where it's a nail biter. It's just kind of in that middle ground. And here are two teams that do a good job of playing in that middle ground. So I thought this was really interesting. And of course, I wanted to find where Tennessee was. And lo and behold, Tennessee was in the first group. What does this mean? What's the criteria of what Tom Fornelli did over here at CBS Sports? Well, he looked at conference games, okay, dating back to 2014, so the last 10 years. He excluded the 2020 season. He didn't include independent teams, obviously, because they don't, play in conference games, and any program that does not have a sample size of at least 40 games. So a lot of these newcomers to the FBS level, they're not included in this as well. And when you look at where Tennessee falls in this, going back to 2014 conference games, Tennessee comes in at number 11 in the section where it's typically a blowout. Meaning, since 2014, 51.39% of Tennessee's SEC games have ended in blowout fashion. What is blowout fashion? That is 17 points or more. Either way, win or loss. Now, going back to 2014, there were many, many more losses in that category than there are in wins. Let's be real here. But can you sit here and think about this? Since 2014, the last 10 football seasons, excluding 2020, but I'll get to the 2020 season here in a moment. I've got some notes here. 50% of Tennessee's conference games have ended in blowouts, one way or the other. That is half. Half of Tennessee's conference games have ended with 17 points or more, whether you won by that or you lost by that. That's pretty remarkable when you sit here and think about it. And, I'm not going to lie to you. When I saw what this article was about, and I read the headline, the first couple of paragraphs, I got to think, okay, well, Tennessee and blowout. I bet Tennessee has been in more blowout games, one way or the other, more than what we would realize because Tennessee was so bad for so long, right? And lo and behold, that was the case. Now, I did not know that Tennessee would be at number 11, and then I did not know that number would be at 51.39%. Which I thought was I thought it was really, really interesting. What are some, I'll get into specific Tennessee stuff in the Josh Heupel era here in segment number 3 in a couple of minutes, but who are some of those other teams that have played in the biggest blowout games one way or the other? Well, number 1 on this list is Rutgers. For obvious reasons, they are very bad. 67% of their Big Ten games have ended in blowouts. Georgia's at number 2 on the flip side of that because Georgia has been so good and so dominant. 63% of the Bulldogs games over the last 10 years have ended in blowouts. Ohio State is number 3. Maryland's at number 4. You can see good, bad, good, bad. Appalachian State would be good at number 5. Michigan at number 6. Vanderbilt is tied for 7th with Kansas. Troy is 9th. Oregon is 10th. Tennessee is 11th. Alabama is 12th, and that makes sense because Alabama's been really, really good. Temple's at 13. Penn State is at 14, and then there's actually a four-way tie here at 15th. Arizona, FIU, SMU, and North Texas. Some of the teams that played in the most tightly contested football games. Virginia's at 1, North Carolina's at 2, Texas is at number 3, Northern Illinois is at 4, Nebraska's at 5, Iowa's at 6, Kansas is at 7, Coastal Carolina is at 8, tied for 9th is Eastern Michigan and Miami, and Old Dominion and South Alabama, and Texas A&M, all at 47.22% of games played have been one-score games. And then Kent State is at 14, and UNLV is 15. And then those teams that play right in the sweet spot, 2-score games. Number 1 is NC State, 2 is Wisconsin, 3 is Arizona State, tied for 4th is New Mexico and Tulsa. Colorado State is 6th, tied for 7th is Miami of Ohio and Wyoming. Tied for 9th is Louisiana Tech and San Diego State. Houston is 11th, tied for 12th is Georgia State and Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. And so that's kind of the 3 groupings that Tom Fornelli has kind of broken it down to. So what I did, and I'm going to get into this in a matter of seconds in segment number 3, is I went back specifically of the Josh Heupel eras, and I excluded conference games. I just looked overall games on the schedule. How many of Tennessee's games in 2021, in 2022, and in 2023 ended in blowout fashion one way or the other? Again, blowout fashion is 17 points or more. You will be amazed at how few games Tennessee has played in where it's been one score or it's been a nail-biter. I mean, truly, we can almost count on one hand in 3 seasons how many times Tennessee's played in a one-score game. It's truly remarkable. And I've got some interesting notes here about the 2020 season and the 2018 season, which are not too good. That's coming up next here as we continue on with a Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. Stay tuned. All right, guys, we got a final segment left here of this Thursday show. We're going back and looking at this article from CBS Sports, looking at tight football games and blowout rates for conferences and specific teams over the last 10 years. Again, a blowout consists of 17 points or more, one way or the other. And this article from Tom Fornelli over at CBS Sports looks at conference games only, dating back to 2014, and Tennessee comes in at number 11, meaning 51.39% of Tennessee's conference games since 2014 have ended in blowout fashion, 17 points or more, one way or the other. That's pretty hard to believe. Now, let's take it a step further. Let's look at all games, not just conference games, but let's look at the Josh Heupel era. In 2021, if you look at all 13 games that Tennessee played, 9 of those games, 9 of the 13 games have ended in 2021 in blowout fashion. Man, 3 of those were blowout losses. 6 of those were blowout wins. You look at it specifically. Bowling Green, huge blowout win. Tennessee Tech, huge blowout win. Sure, those are non-conference. Florida, a blowout loss. Missouri, a blowout win. South Carolina, a blowout win. Alabama, a blowout loss, though it got away from them in the fourth quarter. That was a tight game for a while. Georgia was a blowout loss. That was South Alabama, USA. South Alabama was a blowout win, non-conference. And Vanderbilt was a blowout win. So 9 of the 13 games in Josh Heupel's first season at Tennessee were blowouts, one way or the other. The blowout losses were Florida, Bama. Of course, I already mentioned that. Bama and Georgia. So that's pretty incredible, 9 out of 13. Josh Heupel was pretty consistent in 2022. Tennessee Volunteers in 2022, of the 13 games, 9 of those games in 2022 ended in blowout fashion, but 8 of those were wins, 1 of those were losses, compared to 6 blowout wins in 2021 to 3 blowout losses in 2021. In 2022, obviously, Tennessee finished with a 10-1 or a 10-2 regular season record. That Clemson victory in the Orange Bowl made it 11-2. It was just a fantastic season all the way around. Obviously, you're going to have more blowout wins and blowout losses, but still 9 of the 13 games played ended in 17 points or more, one way or the other. Tennessee blew past Ball State. Tennessee blew past Akron. Tennessee blew past LSU. Tennessee blew past UT Martin. Tennessee blew past Kentucky. Tennessee blew past Missouri. Tennessee got drilled by South Carolina. Tennessee blew past Vanderbilt, and Tennessee blew past Clemson. Technically, Clemson was a 17-point win for the University of Tennessee. 17-point win. I had to double check because simple math fails me a lot of times. But you've got 31 minus 14. That's a 17-point victory for the Tennessee Volunteers, so that counts. In 2022, 9 of 13 games ended in blowout fashion. 8 of those were wins for Tennessee. 1 of those were losses. And then that brings us to 2023. Again, Josh Heupel and his Tennessee Volunteers are consistent. 9 of the 13 games ending in blowout fashion for Tennessee in 2023. So that means in 3 years as head coach, in 3 years, 9 times 3 is what, 27? Josh Heupel, 27 of the 36 games that he has coached here at the University of Tennessee. 39 games. 39 games. 27 of the 39 games. I always want to double check my math because I'm stupid. 27 of the 39 games in 3 seasons for Tennessee under Josh Heupel have ended in blowout fashion. In 2023, you had 7 blowout wins. You had 2 blowout losses. The blowout wins included Virginia, Austin Peay, UTSA, South Carolina, UConn, Vanderbilt, and Iowa. And of course, the blowout losses were to Missouri and Georgia. Georgia has been a common theme here, appearing on the list on 2 separate years. Tennessee's loss to Georgia in 2022 was by 14 points. That does not constitute as a blowout loss. But the wins were 7 in 2023. The losses were 2 in blowout fashion in 2023. So Josh Heupel's very consistent. You want to look at some of the bad numbers a little bit, and this predates Josh Heupel. I wanted to specifically focus on Josh Heupel. I'm not going to go back and look at 2014, 15, 16, 17, all that. For the most part of the Pruitt, Butch, Dooley era, just because I don't have enough time. So I wanted to focus on Josh Heupel, but I did want to go back and draw attention to 2 other seasons during the Heupel era. Tom Fornelli excluded the 2020 season just because it was wacky. Some teams played this amount of games, some teams played that amount of games, some teams didn't play at all, so I get all that. But I looked at the 2020 season. Tennessee, of course, finished 3-7, played 10 games, not very good. Tennessee had 4 blowout losses in that 2020 season and 2 blowout wins. Remember, it started off hot for Tennessee with 2 wins. It was a nail-biting victory on the road at South Carolina, and then it was a blowout win over Missouri at home there in that second game. And then later on, it was a blowout win over Vanderbilt that snapped the big losing streak. So it had 2 blowout wins He had 4 blowout losses. 6 of the 10 games in 2020 for Tennessee ended in blowout fashion, 17 points or more one way or the other. But I'm not going to lie to you, I thought it was 2020. I was looking for a specific stat. I thought it was 2020. That's why I brought up 2020. It was actually 2018. In 2018, Jeremy Pruitt's coached Tennessee Volunteers had 5 losses by 26 points or more. If a blowout is considered 17 points or more, what's the word for 25 points or more? In this case, 26 points or more. Pretty remarkable, right? Think about that. In 2018, Tennessee lost 5 games by 26 points. And Josh even made this point on the show on Wednesday. Even in 2023, as recently as last year, Tennessee's losses were in blowout fashion. Of course, you've got Georgia, you've got Missouri, you've got Florida technically wouldn't blow out, but look back in 2022, it was South Carolina, it was Georgia. I mean, the losses are even in blowout fashion, but in 2018, in one season, Tennessee lost 5 games. 5 games by 26 points or more. So again, there's a lot of numbers here, and I'm throwing them out at you. The biggest conclusion here is in the last 10 years of Tennessee football, there's not been a whole lot of close games. Now, there's been some, don't get me wrong. I mean, let's remember, back in the let's just go, year by year here for a second. There have been some close contested football games. In 2023, the one that jumps out at me, from the get-go was Texas A&M. That was a 7-point game. Kentucky's the one that I thought of was a 6-point game, 33-27. Those were tight-knit football games. In 2022, there wasn't a whole lot of tight-knit football games, but if I can find it. But the two that jump out to me really about 2022 and 2021 were the Pittsburgh games. Tennessee lost by a touchdown to Pittsburgh at home in 2021. Tennessee won by a touchdown on the road in overtime at Pittsburgh in 2022. That was a really, really close football game. And of course, the Florida win in 2022 ended up being a close football game. There should have been another blowout win on this schedule in 2022 because Tennessee led by 17 points with 4 minutes to go in the ball game, ended up winning by only 5 at 38-33. So there have been a couple of close games here and there. Kentucky in 2021, I think that final score was like 45-42. That was a close one. But overall, your exiting analysis would be there's not been many close games been played at Tennessee in conference games, and really close games overall during the Josh Heupel era. But there's been more wins with Josh Heupel than there's been losses. And that does not mean if you go to Neyland Stadium and pay all this money and sacrifice your time and embrace the heat and all that, and you see Tennessee win by 50, you're not pleased and you're not singing Rocky Top leaving the stadium, because I'm sure you are. But that's a big win. Who doesn't want to see your favorite team just pummel the team over there? But in terms of highly contested football games, there's nail biters. There's not been many throughout Tennessee's tenure. Of course, Alabama was one in 2022. We know how that game went, winning on a walk-off field goal there. And at one point in time, you thought Tennessee had blown it in the fourth quarter with that scoop and score by Dallas Turner, was it? So I don't know. Maybe this was too number driven. Maybe you're just sitting here listening or watching saying, okay, so what? Who cares? I found that super interesting that in the last 10 years, and specifically in the Josh Heupel era, when you look at every single game he's played, 27 of the 39 games have ended in blowouts one way or the other under Josh Heupel. There has only been 12 games in the Josh Heupel era that have not been considered blowouts one way or the other, meaning the margin of victory was 16 points or less. Truly incredible. I thought this was really, really interesting. So here's the more blowout wins. Here's the more wins in general. Don't matter how you get them. Doesn't matter how they come. A win is a win is a win. My coach in college, Ken Sparks, one time we played like crap on the road at Rome, Georgia. Shout out Shorter. And Shorter was not good, and we were very good, and we played like crap. We only won by like a touchdown or whatever, and people were upset in the locker room. And he said, hey, don't ever apologize for a win. Especially on the road, don't ever apologize for the win. So doesn't matter if you get it in blowout fashion or if you scrape by in a nail biter. A win's a win's a win. And I'm looking forward to more wins for Josh Heupel in 2024. So hope you enjoyed that article. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. Again, stemming from a CBS Sports article from Tom Fornelli. I thought it was really, really cool, and hope you guys liked it. On tomorrow's show, big show coming up. Player draft, Tennessee football player draft. Me and Boogie Bentley of Talking Vols, we're going to alternate picks. Whose team is going to be better when it's all said and done? You everydayers, you've probably caught one of these episodes the last couple of years. It happens tomorrow right here on Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys for being here. Tell your friends about this show if you enjoy it. It will be your number one stop for anything you need to know about Tennessee football and recruiting. Should have some recruiting news this weekend as well, so one way or the other. So, this is your spot, and you don't want to miss anything. It's every weekday morning wherever you get your podcast. Download us, subscribe to us, help us out. Let's grow the show. Appreciate you as always. We'll talk again tomorrow. This is Locked On Vols.